Page 85 in the book Official Stories by Liam SCHEFF. In the 1950s, two researchers in England, James Watson and Francis Crick, having borrowed without asking, quote unquote, other people's research on the subject, said that they discovered the form and structure of DNA. They called it the central molecule of life, and even though they had just begun to describe it and could not really observe it, they were sure they knew enough about it to lay down what they called the central dogma. And that's really all you need to know about PhD researchers. Their dogma declared that DNA, which is a twisting, curling, bunching up spiral ladder in your cell's nucleus, was like the Alexandria library of your body. It never changed. No new books came in, old books could be checked out, but only as copies. The library, or DNA, never changed its content. To copy a book or stretch of DNA out the rather magical 3D factory floor of the cell employs enzymes, little protein squiggles curled into shapes which through processes that defy Darwinian logic know how to uncurl a stretch of DNA, copy a little out, and then release that copy called RNA into that cell where it travels on to better things. DNA copies out, never in. That was a central dogma, and of course, it was wrong. By the early 1970s, researchers in the US and Japan realized that RNA copied into DNA. Because this upset the central dogma, it had to be considered an aberrant act. They couldn't say the central dogma is wrong and DNA is rather fluid. It copies in, it copies out, in, out, normal. Instead, they said that can't be because Watson and Crick said so. So let's say that what's happening is dangerous. In fact, let's say that whenever RNA copies into DNA, it's a virus. And that's what they did. When DNA copies out to RNA, it uses magical little enzymes to do the transcribing. Those are called transcriptase. When the reverse happens and RNA copied into DNA, it would be right. Reverse transcriptase, or RT as we shall call it from now on. So we have transcriptase when DNA copies out to RNA, and then when RNA copies into DNA, it's called reverse transcriptase, or RT. Okay, so now the virus hunters looking for a new kind of virus to blame for cancers had found their dog. In RT, a common, even ubiquitous enzyme process would now stand in for a new kind of virus, one that goes backward in reverse, a retrovirus. And that's what virology would become, a hunt for a non-specific enzyme. Again, reverse transcriptase RT was discovered and was considered to be universal to all animals, but it was also decided by one group of researchers to be all they needed to claim they'd found a virus that causes cancer. Okay, so now we're going to go into the history of Robert Gallo. Okay, remember I said that that's an important name to note. So in 1976, Robert Gallo, a young, argumentative, ego-driven cancer virus hunter at the National Cancer Institute, claimed discovery of the first cancer-causing retrovirus, HL23V. "I've done it," he said, awaiting his Nobel Prize. Gallo had mastered the art of stimulating cancerous white blood cells, leukemia, in glass containers with chemicals for the curious PHA, phytohemagglutinin, and IL-2 interleukin into a constant production of RT. He could get cells to produce a regular flow of RT by chemically kicking them. By doing this and finding some of those very normal budding particles, he claimed to find the first virus or retrovirus that caused cancer. Success was his. Long live Gallo, went the chorus in his head. But wait, not so fast, said some of his colleagues who examined his materials and methods. You've mixed together cells from 3 monkeys. You haven't found a thing. You're a fraud. Whoops! cried Robert Gallo. "I didn't mean to mix 3 monkey samples together and claim I had found a new virus. It just happened by accident." And that is, in truth, what he said. Because of laboratory contamination, his HL23V, as he called the virus that he did not find that did not cause cancer, was really a mixture of proteins and enzymes from 3 monkeys. "Whoops," he said. "It must have fallen into the petri dish by mistake." His peers, not yet totally corrupted by insane levels of money and pharmaceutical interest, looked on with disapproval, and Gallo skulked off, never to be heard from again, until in 1981. After some years in the wilderness, quickly licking his wounded ego, Robert Gallo returned. He said that he found a new, virus that caused cancer. And this time, nobody looked into what he was doing, so it managed to stick. Okay, so then he claimed to have discovered a cancer retrovirus he called HTLV1, or human T-cell leukemia virus, a retrovirus that caused T cells, one kind of white blood cell, to go crazy and become cancerous. So in this chapter, he talks about basically He needed some test subjects, so he scoured the map and medical literature and found his quarry. He decided that it belonged to a group of people in southern Japan who had a rare leukemia. Okay, so here's the part that I want you to pay attention to, because all the rest of that really doesn't matter. It's all just junk science, pure crap. You couldn't prove the existence of a chair in a room using their methods. RT bubbling proteins coming out of hyperstimulated cells, they're looking for what they've already found and what they've learned to manufacture. But here's the philosophical and psychological basis for their quest. Gallo claimed that the people with leukemia in this region of southern Japan had a retrovirus, that the virus came from monkeys, that it was transmitted through the slave trade, that it exists in Black Africans, and that it is sexually transmitted. Pause, skip a beat. Does that sound familiar? Hold it into your memory. On we go. And that it also appears in this very specific Japanese population who happen to live within 175 miles of Nagasaki, where a nuclear bomb had been detonated about 35 years earlier. Okay, so you might be inclined to point out that radiation exposure very often leads to cancer even after decades, but that's not important to Robert Gallo. So please keep that to yourself. Gallo made a protein or antibody test and demonstrated that a very small percentage of people who tested positive for his virus, really for his proteins, got leukemia. That is, almost no one who he said had the virus also had leukemia. Gallo claimed that the rate was 4%. An online medical search, Virology Online, calls it 1 out of 500, or 0.2%. But one of Gallo's contemporaries, Peter Duesberg, pointed out that in a group of over 600,000 people who tested positive for HTLV1, if you believe the test that he had made, 339 people had leukemia. Duesberg puts the rate of HTLV causing leukemia at 0.06%. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. So now we have the fast lane. Okay, and now a question. Gay men are different than straight men. How? Think about that for a minute and we'll do the setup. And I will go over that in the next part, in the next episode. The fast lane. Page 89 in Official Stories by Liam SCHEFF. And now a question. Gay men are different than straight men. How? Just think about that. In the 1960s, fueled, I suspect, more by the pharmaceutical liberation of the birth control pill than by any age of Aquarius, young women found that they could all have sex without becoming pregnant. This was considered a great advance in civilization, and it certainly changed the Western world. Some synthetic drugs like LSD, which had been used in the CIA's MK Ultra program, totally different subject, definitely something to look into. so made it from university, so the children of the bourgeoisie who decided that the world was an illusion and sex and music were a better way to pass the time than going to kill Vietnamese women and children. By 1968, libertine was the fashion, and the button-down Lutheran Protestants of the Northeast grew their hair. Okay, so let's move down to, so there was no really such thing as gay men in 1968, or there was no gay identity that was out and proud and through Mardi Gras parades in West Hollywood. Homosexuality was considered a sin, a crime, or a mental disorder by just about everyone, which made it very difficult and psychology torturous to be a gay male or female. For most of American history and world history for that matter, it hasn't been possible to be homosexual and be happily integrated into the larger culture. The underground was an escape, but life in daylight was often lived married to someone either as a father or a mother with a heterosexual partner. Okay, so now by 1969, the gay underground wanted to come out and play just like their heterosexual peers. So that's in 1969. Then Larry Kramer, remember his name from this book here? Larry Kramer, a gay activist, pro-pharma activist, playwright, and author, spoke with naked candor on the fast lane sex life and drug diet. In his book On the Era, which he called Faggots, he listed 76 drugs that were used on any given weekend by the boys on the circuit. Here are the highlights. Okay, so this goes through a huge list of different types of drugs. There's probably, 30, 40 of them. So, yeah, but not on the list, but in wide use were the drugs we don't count as drugs, which are alcohol, cigarettes, and for Boys Town, a smelly chemical called poppers. Poppers weren't even considered a drug, but a party favor, like a beer at a game or a glass of wine with dinner. These were inhalant drugs that came in bottles that said flammable, fatal if swallowed on the label, but were snorted and huffed from bottles and rags all night. Why? Because they gave a great rush, extended libido and erections far beyond the boundaries of normal human fatigue. More than that, because they rendered the user insensible to pain, the muscles and the sphincter would relax. Taken with methamphetamines, a lot of sex was and is was more intense, invasive, and penetrating of the body than anything anyone had seen or done before. It was done in groups with multiple partners and night after night after night. Okay, so that's really important to understand that these men are in these type of environments and sexual acts, and it's just ongoing. Their bodies are being damaged in more ways than one. So what makes a gay man different from a straight man? The answer is hardly anything. Men, to quote through the ages, are swine, dogs, pigs, animals. We even call each other dog as a greeting. We know it's funny to us. From our teens into our 20s, hardly a minute goes by where we don't think about sex. At age 16 and 17, it's like a mental disorder. So what separates gay men from a straight man? It's basically women. Women is the answer to that. So what gay men don't have to deal with is a handbrake. They simply can just say, do you want to have sex? Boom, done, see you later. But women give us, or men, tests, tasks, and obstacles. Did you buy me a ring? You're moving too fast. All that stuff. Okay, so this goes into really grave detail. And basically, okay, if you have sex with 2 or 5 or 8 guys in a night, or 10, 20, 30, or 50 in a week, and this was happening, you're going to have such a collection of STDs that you could open a microbial zoo and charge admission to see the strange creatures you're carrying around. To deal with this, these guys popped antibiotics. There were dishes and bowls in the bathhouses where so much of this sexual activity took place. Drugs like tetracycline and other broad-spectrum gut-stripping chemicals. Antibiotics are gut bombs. They wipe out all the essential bacteria in your intestines so you can't really digest. You have diarrhea, no appetite, and you begin to starve. Add it to your pileup of STDs, and what happens is you lose your functional immune system. But more on that in a minute. Okay, so